The year was 1847, and the screams echoing from Devil's Canyon that autumn morning would haunt the town of Cedar Ridge. For generations, 18-year-old Evangeline Harper lay broken on the rocky ledge below, her white dress torn and bloodied, while Sheriff Matthias Caldwell stood at the cliff's edge above, his face twisted with rage. What happened next would change everything anyone thought they knew about justice, love, and the untamed frontier of the American West. Evangeline Harper had always been different from the other girls in Cedar Ridge. While they spent their days learning needlework and dreaming of marriage, she preferred riding her father's horses across the endless prairie, her auburn hair flowing free in the wind. At 18, she possessed a spirit that couldn't be tamed. Much to her father's worry and her mother's despair, the Harper family had settled in Cedar Ridge 3 years earlier. When Evangeline was just 15, her father, Josiah Harper, had opened the town's first general store, and her mother, Constance, tried her best to make their small cabin feel like the home they'd left behind in Missouri. But this was different, land-wild, unforgiving, and beautiful in ways that took your breath away. Sheriff Matthias Caldwell had been watching Evangeline since the day she arrived. At 35, he was Cedar Ridge's most powerful man, feared by outlaws and respected by townspeople. His badge gave him authority, but his cold gray eyes and cruel smile gave him something else entirely: the ability to make people do what he wanted through fear alone. On that fateful Tuesday morning in October, Sheriff Caldwell rode up to the Harper homestead with a purpose that had been building in his mind for months. He dismounted his black stallion and straightened his vest, checking his reflection in the cabin's small window before knocking on the door. "Mrs. Harper," he said, tipping his hat as Constance opened the door, "I've come to speak with your husband about a matter of importance." Constance wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron, her weathered face showing concern. "He's out back chopping wood, Sheriff. Is there trouble?" "No trouble at all, ma'am. Just business." Josiah Harper appeared around the corner of the cabin, axe still in hand, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Sheriff Caldwell, what brings you out this way?" "I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." The words hung in the air like smoke from a rifle shot. Josiah's grip tightened on the axe handle, and Constance gasped softly behind him. "Evangeline," Josiah asked, though he knew there was no other daughter. "She's of marrying age, and I'm a man of means. I can provide for her better than any cowpoke or farmer's son in these parts." Josiah set down his axe carefully. He'd heard stories about Sheriff Caldwell, about his temper, about what happened to people who crossed him. But this was his daughter they were talking about. "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff, but that decision belongs to Evangeline herself." Caldwell's smile faltered slightly. "I was hoping for your blessing, Harper. It would make things easier." "I'll speak with her," Josiah said diplomatically, "but I won't force her into anything." "See that you do." Caldwell's voice carried a warning. "I'm not a patient man, and I don't like being disappointed." After the sheriff rode away, Josiah found Evangeline in the barn, brushing down her favorite mare, a spirited paint horse she'd named Willow. She looked up as he entered, her green eyes immediately reading the worry on his face. "What's wrong?" "Papa." Josiah sat down on a hay bale, suddenly feeling much older than his 43 years. "Sheriff Caldwell was here. He wants to marry you." Evangeline's brush stopped mid-stroke. "Marry me? That awful man?" "He's waiting for an answer." "Then I'll give him one." Her voice was firm, but Josiah could see the fear flickering in her eyes. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew what kind of man the sheriff was. "Evangeline, you need to think about this carefully. He's not someone you want as an enemy." "I don't care if he's the president himself, Papa. I won't marry a man I don't love, especially not him." That evening, Sheriff Caldwell returned, dressed in his finest clothes and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers that looked pitiful in his large, rough hands. Evangeline met him on the front porch, her parents standing nervously behind her. "Miss Harper," he began, his voice attempting charm but sounding more like gravel, "I hope you've considered my proposal." "I have, Sheriff Caldwell, and my answer is no." The flowers fell from his hands, scattering petals across the wooden planks. His face darkened, and for a moment The mask of civility slipped completely. "No, I don't wish to marry you. I'm sure there are many other fine women in town who would be honored by your attention." Caldwell stepped closer, his presence filling the small porch. "There are no other women like you, Evangeline, and I always get what I want. Not this time." Her voice didn't waver, though her heart was pounding like a war drum. He stared at her for a long moment, his gray eyes cold as winter stones. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his horse. Before mounting, he looked back at the family. "You'll regret this decision, all of you. Mark my words." As he rode away, Constance put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Maybe we should consider leaving town," she whispered. "We're not running," Evangeline said firmly. "This is our home." But even as she spoke the brave words, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just signed her own death warrant. Over the next 2 weeks, life in Cedar Ridge became increasingly difficult for the Harper family. Customers stopped coming to their store, claiming they were told to take their business elsewhere. Josiah's requests for supplies from neighboring towns were mysteriously delayed or lost entirely. Even at church, the family found themselves sitting alone, other parishioners avoiding their gaze. Sheriff Caldwell made sure his presence was felt. He rode past their homestead daily, sometimes stopping to water his horse at their well without permission. His eyes always searching for Evangeline. When she went to town for supplies, he would appear as if by magic, tipping his hat and making polite conversation that felt more like threats wrapped in courtesy. "How are you settling into our little community, Miss Harper?" he asked one afternoon as she loaded flour into her wagon. "Just fine, thank you. I do hope you're finding everything you need. It would be such a shame if something were to happen to your family's livelihood." Evangeline met his gaze steadily. "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" "Merely an observation about how fragile things can be out here in the wilderness." The breaking point came on a Saturday evening, when 3 of Caldwell's deputies showed up at the Harper cabin with a warrant for Josiah's arrest. "What's the charge?" Josiah asked, standing in his doorway. "Selling watered-down whiskey." Deputy Morrison replied, though he couldn't meet Josiah's eyes. "I don't sell whiskey. I don't even drink it. Evidence says otherwise." They took him away, in shackles, leaving Constance and Evangeline alone with their fears. The next morning, Caldwell himself brought the news that Josiah had been released due to insufficient evidence. But the message was clear: cross the sheriff, and there would be consequences. That same week, their barn caught fire in the middle of the night. By the time they managed to put it out, half their winter feed was gone. Along with most of their tools, no one saw how it started, and Sheriff Caldwell expressed his deep concern for their safety. When he came to investigate, "These things happen out here," he said, walking through the charred remains. "Wild country, wild accidents. A man needs protection for his family." Evangeline watched him from the cabin door, her hands clenched into fists. She knew exactly what kind of protection he was offering. The final straw came on a Tuesday market day. Evangeline was in town selling her mother's preserves when she overheard Mrs. Whitman talking to the baker's wife. "That Harper girl has brought nothing but trouble to this town. Sheriff says she's been encouraging the Indian raids, signaling them from her family's property." "That's a lie," Evangeline burst out, causing both women to gasp and step back. Mrs. Whitman's face flushed red. "Young lady, you forget yourself. The sheriff wouldn't lie about such serious matters. The sheriff would lie about the color of the sky if it served his purposes." Word of the confrontation reached Caldwell within the hour. He found Evangeline loading her empty wagon, preparing to head home. "You've got quite a mouth on you, Miss Harper. Perhaps it's time someone taught you to use it properly. Perhaps it's time someone taught you that you can't force people to love you." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, squeezing until she winced. "Love? You think this is about love? This is about respect, girl. And you're going to learn to show me some." Several townspeople had stopped to watch, but none moved to help. Evangeline jerked her arm free and climbed onto her wagon. "The only thing I've learned, Sheriff, is that a badge doesn't make a man. It just makes a coward feel powerful." She drove away, her heart pounding, knowing she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. "Chew this for pain," he said, indicating a bitter-tasting root. This for cuts. Keep away bad spirits that make flesh rot over the next 3 days. He made several trips up and down the cliff face, bringing food, water, and supplies. Slowly, Evangeline grew stronger, though she was still too injured to attempt the dangerous climb out of the canyon. They talked during his visits, sharing stories and gradually learning to trust each other. Swift Eagle told her about his people's struggles with the advancing white settlements, about the buffalo herds growing smaller each year, about the constant threat of cavalry patrols. "Your people fear mine," he said during one conversation, "but we fear yours more. You take land, kill buffalo, make war when we only want to live." "Not all white people are like that," Evangeline replied. "Some of us just want to build homes and raise families." Sheriff with star. "He make all whites look bad. He take what he want, hurt who he want. My people see this, think all whites same." Evangeline thought about this. In town, people think all Indians are savage killers. They don't see that you're helping me. Fear make people stupid, on both sides. As her strength returned, Evangeline found herself looking forward to Swift Eagle's visits. He was intelligent, gentle, and possessed a dry sense of humor that reminded her of her father. When he smiled, which was rare but wonderful, his whole face transformed. On the 4th day, he brought disturbing news. "Your parents look for you. Sheriff tell them you run away, but they not believe. They ask soldiers to search." "Soldiers? Bluecoats from fort. They come to canyon tomorrow, maybe find you." Evangeline's heart leaped. Rescue was coming. But then she saw the worry in Swift Eagle's eyes. "What's wrong? If soldiers find me here with you." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened to Indians caught with white women, especially in circumstances like these. "Then you have to go, now, before they arrive." Swift Eagle looked at her for a long moment. "I think, maybe you come with me." "What? My people have winter camp 3 days ride from here. Safe place, you heal there, then decide what to do." Evangeline stared at him in shock. "You're asking me to go with the Comanche. I ask you to live. Sheriff think you dead. If you return to town, he kill you for truth. If soldiers find you here alone, maybe they not believe your story either." It was true. Who would believe that she'd survived a fall from Devil's Canyon and been cared for by a Comanche warrior? And Caldwell had enough influence to twist any story to his advantage. "I can't just disappear. My parents, they grieve now, but they live. You return. Maybe you all die." The sound of distant horses drifted up from the canyon floor. The search party was approaching. "Decide now," Swift Eagle urged. "Come with me, or face what comes." Evangeline looked up at the canyon rim, thinking of her parents' love and worry. Then she looked at Swift Eagle, this man who had risked everything to save a stranger. "If I come with you, what then?" "Then you live, and maybe you find something worth living for." The horses were getting closer. Swift Eagle began gathering his ropes and equipment, preparing to climb back up the cliff face to a hidden trail he'd shown her the day before. "Evangeline," he said, using her name for the first time. "Choice is yours, but choose now." She could hear voices echoing off the canyon walls, her father's voice among them, calling her name with desperate hope. Evangeline closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made the decision that would define the rest of her life. "I'll come with you." The journey to Swift Eagle's winter camp took 4 days instead of 3 because of Evangeline's injuries. They traveled mostly at dawn and dusk, avoiding the heat of the day and the possibility of being spotted by cavalry patrols. Swift Eagle had horses hidden in a canyon 5 miles from Devil's Canyon, sturdy Indian ponies that could cover rough ground quickly and quietly. Evangeline had never ridden bareback before, and the first day was agony for her healing shoulder. But Swift Eagle was patient, teaching her how to grip with her knees and move with the horse's rhythm. By the 2nd day, she was beginning to understand why the Comanche were considered the finest horsemen on the plains. The landscape they traveled through was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Vast expanses of grass that rolled like ocean waves, broken by deep arroyos and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. The sky seemed impossibly huge, stretching from horizon to horizon without obstruction. "Your God make big country." Swift Eagle observed during one of their rest stops. "It's beautiful." Evangeline agreed. "But so empty, not empty, full of life if you know how to see." He pointed out things she would never have noticed: the tracks of deer and elk in soft earth, the calls of different birds and what they meant, the plants that could provide food or medicine. The plains that had seemed empty to her eyes were actually teeming with life. White man see land, think only of what he can take from it. Swift Eagle explained. Comanche see land, think of how to live with it. "Is that why you helped me? Because of how you see things differently?" He was quiet. For a long moment, his dark eyes focused on the distant horizon. "I help you because wrong is wrong. Color of skin not change that." On the third night, they saw smoke from cooking fires in the distance. Swift Eagle's band was close. "Will they accept me?" Evangeline asked, suddenly nervous about meeting an entire tribe of Comanche. Chief Running Bear wise man. He listened. 2. Reason. But others, Swift Eagle shrugged. "They see white skin. Remember soldiers who kill their families. Not all will welcome. Maybe this is a mistake." "No mistake, but not easy either." They approached the camp the next morning, when the sun was still low in the eastern sky. Evangeline's first glimpse of a Comanche village took her breath away. Nearly 50 buffalo hide tipis were arranged in a rough circle round a central area where fires burned and children played. Horses grazed in herds nearby, and the whole scene had an air of organized chaos that somehow felt comfortable and homey. But their arrival caused immediate commotion. Warriors grabbed weapons, women pulled children behind them, and dogs began barking furiously. Swift Eagle raised his hand in greeting, calling out in the Comanche language. But every eye was fixed on the white woman riding beside him. An older man emerged from the largest tipi, his presence immediately commanding respect from the others. This had to be Chief Running Bear. He was perhaps 60 years old, his hair completely gray, and his face marked with the lines of a man who'd seen much of life's joy and sorrow. He spoke to Swift Eagle in rapid Comanche, his tone questioning, but not hostile. Swift Eagle replied at length, occasionally gesturing toward Evangeline. She couldn't understand the words, but she could read the story in their voices. Swift Eagle explaining what he'd witnessed, the chief asking pointed questions about her presence. Finally, Chief Running Bear approached her horse and looked up at her with curious dark eyes. "You are the woman thrown from cliff by man with star?" His English was better than Swift Eagle's, though still heavily accented. "Yes, sir, Chief Running Bear, I presume." A slight smile touched his weathered features. "I am called this." Swift Eagle tells story of your falling. Interesting story. He saved my life. Yes. This creates, how you say, obligation. Evangeline wasn't sure if he meant obligation for her or for the tribe, but she nodded respectfully. "I don't want to bring trouble to your people. Trouble comes whether we invite or not." Running Bear replied philosophically. "Question is what we do with trouble when it arrives." A woman emerged from one of the tipis and approached them. She was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair braided with silver ornaments and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She spoke to Running Bear in Comanche, her tone suggesting she was asking questions about the stranger. "This is Singing Crow, my wife," Running Bear explained. "She asks if white woman has courtesy to dismount when meeting Chief of Comanche." Embarrassed, Evangeline quickly slid down from her horse, wincing as her injured shoulder protested the movement. She attempted a bow, which made Singing Crow laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. "She laughs because you bow like white man meeting king." Running Bear translated. "Comanche way is to look in eyes, speak truth. You do this." "I try to." "Good." "Swift Eagle vouches for you. Says you have strong spirit, brave heart. This rare for white woman. I've had good teachers lately." Running Bear studied her face for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "You stay. Learn our ways when you strong enough. Decide what path your feet will walk." "Thank you." "Do not thank yet. Winter coming. Days grow cold, nights longer. If you stay through winter, spring may bring different choices." Singing Crow stepped forward and took Evangeline's good arm, speaking in Comanche mixed with broken English. She was clearly offering to help tend her injuries and find her a place to rest. My wife says you look like sick bird. Running Bear translated with what might have been humor. She fix. As Evangeline was led away toward one of the tippies, she looked back at Swift Eagle. He was unsaddling the horses, but he caught her glance and nodded reassuringly. For the first time since falling from that cliff, she began to believe she might actually survive. Living with the Comanche was unlike anything Evangeline could have imagined. Everything she thought she knew about savage Indians proved to be wrong. The band was a complex society with its own laws, customs, and traditions that had sustained them for generations. Singing Crow took charge of her recovery, treating her injuries with methods that proved remarkably effective. Poultices made from prairie plants reduced the swelling in her shoulder, while teas brewed from various roots helped her regain strength. Within 2 weeks, Evangeline was moving freely again, though she still favored her left arm. The language barrier was challenging at first, but several members of the band spoke at least some English, learned through trading or raids on settlements. The children, especially, seemed fascinated by the white woman and would gather round her, chattering in Comanche and laughing when she tried to repeat their words. Swift Eagle became her primary teacher, showing her how to read the sky for weather, signs, how to identify edible plants, and how to move quietly across different types of terrain. He was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise when she succeeded. "You learn quick for white woman," he said one afternoon as she successfully tracked a rabbit through tall grass. "For a white woman," she replied with mock indignation. His rare smile appeared. "You learn quick for anyone." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. As the days grew shorter and colder, Evangeline found herself settling into the rhythm of camp life. She helped the women with cooking and hide preparation, learning skills that would have been unthinkable in her former life. She discovered that she had a talent for working with leather, creating intricate patterns that impressed even the most skilled craftswomen. The children adopted her as a favorite aunt, following her around camp and teaching her games that involved much laughing and falling down. Their acceptance made her integration into the tribe much easier if the children trusted her. The adults were more willing to give her a chance, but not everyone was welcoming. A warrior named Striking Wolf made no secret of his distrust. He was Swift Eagle's age, with a fierce reputation and scars that spoke of many battles. He'd lost his brother in a cavalry raid the previous spring, and his hatred of whites ran deep. "She brings danger," he argued during tribal councils that Swift Eagle later told her about. "Soldiers will come looking. They will blame us for her disappearance." "She was already dead to them," Swift Eagle replied. "What danger can a ghost bring? Ghosts have power to cause great harm." The debate continued throughout the early winter, with Running Bear listening to all sides, but making no immediate decision about Evangeline's long-term future. She sensed that her presence was causing division in the tribe, and the knowledge troubled her. One evening in late November, as snow began to fall for the first time, she approached Swift Eagle with her concerns. "Maybe I should leave," she said, as they sat by his fire. "I'm causing problems for your people." "Where would you go?" It was a fair question. She couldn't return to Cedar Ridge. Caldwell would ensure she never lived to tell her story. She had no other family, no friends in distant towns, no skills that would allow her to survive alone on the frontier. "I don't know, but I can't stay here if it's going to split the tribe." Swift Eagle studied her face in the firelight. "Why you care what happens to Comanche? We are enemy of your people. You're not my enemy. You saved my life when you could have let me die. Your people took me in when they could have driven me away. How could I call you enemies? White men call us savage, say we have no honor, no conscience. You believe this before?" Evangeline considered the question honestly. "I believed what I was told. I was afraid of Indians because I'd heard terrible stories. And now I know that people are people, regardless of their skin color. Some are good, some are bad. Most are somewhere in between, trying to do their best." Swift Eagle was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. Finally, he spoke again. "Striking Wolf is not wrong to worry. Spring will bring soldiers, traders. Maybe your sheriff looking for sign of what happened to white woman. Your presence here could mean war. Then I'll leave before spring." "And go where?" he asked again. I'll figure something out. Swift Eagle reached into his medicine pouch and pulled out a small carved bone pendant, shaped like a flying eagle. He held it out to her. My grandmother make this for me when I take warrior name. She say eagle must learn to fly alone before it can soar with others. Evangeline took the pendant, feeling its smooth surface warm under her fingers. What are you saying? Maybe time you learn to fly. As winter deepened over the southern plains, the Comanche band settled into their cold weather routines. Hunting parties went out daily, bringing back deer, elk, and the occasional buffalo. The women worked constantly preparing hides, making winter clothing, and preserving meat for the hardest months ahead. Evangeline threw herself into learning these skills, driven partly by necessity and partly by a growing fascination with the Comanche way of life. She discovered that she had steady hands for beadwork and an eye for the patterns that decorated their clothing and ceremonial items, but it was during the long winter evenings, sitting around fires while snow swirled outside, the tippies, that she truly began to understand the people who had saved her life. The Comanche had a rich oral tradition, with stories that explained everything from the creation of the world to the proper way to approach a wild horse. Running Bear was the tribe's primary storyteller, and his deep voice could hold audiences spellbound for hours. One night in December, as the wind howled across the plains like a living thing, he told the story of a white buffalo that appeared to a lost warrior. Buffalo was beautiful beyond describing, Running Bear said, his eyes reflecting the firelight, white as fresh snow, but with spirit that burned like flame. Warrior think he dream, but buffalo speak to him. What did it say? Asked one of the children. Buffalo say, color of hide not matter. What matters is strength of heart, purity of spirit. Some with dark hide have hearts white as snow. Some with white hide have hearts black as night. Evangeline felt every eye in the tipi turned toward her, and she understood that the story was meant for her ears as much as anyone's. After the formal storytelling ended and people began drifting back to their own fires, Swift Eagle walked with her through the quiet camp. Running Bear likes you, he said simply. I'm honored by his acceptance, is more than acceptance. He sees something in you that reminds him of his own daughter. This was the first Evangeline had heard of Running Bear having a daughter. Where is she? Swift Eagle's expression darkened. Soldiers take her 3 summers ago. She was picking berries with other women when bluecoats attack. They say she resist, so they. He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm sorry. Her name was Morning Star. She had spirit like yours strong. Will not bend to what others demand. They walked in silence for a while, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Finally, Swift Eagle spoke again. Running Bear see you, sometimes think she come back, but also see that keeping you here maybe bring same fate to others. He wants me to leave. He wants you to be safe. But safe for white woman and safe for Comanche may be different things. That night, lying in the tipi she shared with Singing Crow and 2 other women, Evangeline stared up at the smoke hole and watched stars glitter in the clear winter sky. She thought about her parents, probably spending their first winter in a decade without their daughter. She thought about Sheriff Caldwell, no doubt continuing his reign of terror in Cedar Ridge. And she thought about the impossible situation. She found herself into white to truly belong with the Comanche, to changed by her experiences to ever fit back into white society. The next morning brought news that would force all these questions to a head. A young warrior named Fast Horse rode into camp with information from his scouting trip to the eastern settlements. He spoke rapidly to Running Bear in Comanche, his face grim with concern. What is it? Evangeline asked Swift Eagle, who had been listening intently. Your sheriff. He comes this way with soldiers and civilian volunteers. They say they track raiding party that took white woman. Evangeline's blood ran cold. How many men? Swift Eagle translated the question, then relayed Fast Horse's answer. 20 soldiers, maybe 15 civilians. They follow old trail, but trail leads toward our winter camp. That's impossible. I came here willingly. There was no raiding party. Sheriff not tell truth about this. Swift Eagle's tone was dry with irony. Running Bear approached them, his face serious. Fast Horse says they may be today's ride from here. We must decide quickly what to do. I'll leave, Evangeline said immediately. I'll ride out and surrender myself to them. Tell them I escaped on my own. They not believe. Running Bear replied, Sheriff want excuse to attack Comanche. Your presence here or not, he will find reason. Then what do? We prepare for what comes. But first, you must choose your path with full knowledge. Running Bear gestured for her to follow him to his tipi, where Singing Crow was waiting, with a bundle of clothes, white woman's clothes, carefully cleaned and mended. We keep your dress from Cliff, Singing Crow explained in her broken English. Think maybe someday you need. Evangeline stared at the bundle, her old life, wrapped in brown paper and tied with sinew. The sight of it brought tears to her eyes. I can go back, she whispered. You can try. Running Bear corrected. But woman who fell from cliff, she is gone. Woman who sits in my tipi now, she is different person. Question is, which woman you choose to be? I don't understand. Swift Eagle knelt beside her, his voice gentle. You go back to white world. You must pretend winter with Comanche never happen. Must lie about who help you, how you survive. Must become same woman who let Sheriff terrorize her family. But if you stay, you choose new path. But path has dangers, may lead to death for you, for us. Evangeline looked around the tipi at these people who had become her family. Singing Crow with her motherly concern. Running Bear with his quiet wisdom. Swift Eagle with his steady strength. In 4 months, they had given her more acceptance and genuine affection than she'd found in 18 years of white society. But they had also given her something else, the knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. The woman who had stood up to Sheriff Caldwell and been thrown from a cliff had been brave, but she'd also been naive about the true nature of power. The woman who had learned to track game, work with leather, and speak a new language understood that real strength came from adapting to circumstances while holding onto your core principles. There's a third choice, she said slowly. Both men looked at her questioningly. I don't run away, and I don't hide. I face what's coming. But I face it as myself, not as the helpless girl who fell from that cliff, and not as someone pretending to be Comanche when I'm not. What you mean? Swift Eagle asked. Evangeline stood up, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. I mean, I tell the truth, all of it, about what Caldwell did, about how you saved me, about what I've learned living here. Let people decide for themselves what to believe. Running Bear studied her face carefully. Truth is dangerous thing on frontier, sometimes more dangerous than lies, maybe. But lies are what got us into this situation in the first place. And if they not believe truth, then at least I'll know I face the consequences of my choices honestly. Swift Eagle reached out and touched the eagle pendant she still wore around her neck. You ready to fly alone? Evangeline took a deep breath, thinking of all the people who had shaped her journey. Her parents with their love and sacrifice, Sheriff Caldwell with his cruelty and abuse of power, and these Comanche who had shown her what real honor looked like. I think I'm ready to try. The next morning, Evangeline dressed in her white woman's clothes for the first time in months. The fabric felt strange against her skin after wearing soft buckskin, and the restrictive corset seemed almost unbearable after the freedom of Comanche dress. But she endured it, knowing that appearance would matter in what was to come. Singing Crow braided her hair in the white woman's style, though she wove a single eagle feather into the plaits, a sign of the courage she would need. Running Bear gave her a painted pony, one of his finest horses, and a rifle that had been taken in a raid years before. You sure about this path? Swift Eagle asked as they prepared to ride out. No, Evangeline admitted, but it's the right path. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Evangeline would ride out alone to meet the search party, while Swift Eagle and a small group of warriors followed at a distance to observe. If things went badly, they would intervene, though everyone understood that such intervention would likely mean war. They reached the meeting point, a broad valley between the low hills. Just as the sun reached its zenith, Caldwell's party was already there, having made camp by a small stream. Evangeline could see the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers, mixing with the rougher clothes of civilian volunteers. Remember, Swift Eagle said before she rode down into the valley, Truth is your weapon, but be ready to fight if truth fails. Evangeline nodded, touched the eagle pendant for luck, and spurred her horse down the slope. Her appearance caused immediate commotion in the camp. Men reached for weapons. Officers shouted orders, and horses shied nervously at the sudden activity. But Evangeline rode steadily forward, her head high and her hands visible to show she carried no immediate threat. Sheriff Caldwell emerged from a canvas tent, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and finally settling on cold calculation. Behind him came a cavalry officer, a captain by his insignia, and several men Evangeline recognized from Cedar Ridge. "Well," Caldwell said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "look what the savages finally decided to return to us, Sheriff." "Caldwell," Evangeline replied formally, bringing her horse to a stop 20 feet from the assembled men. Captain Morrison." "Ma'am," the officer replied, stepping forward. "We've been searching for you for months. Your parents have been beside themselves with worry." "How are they, my parents?" "Alive, but grieving. They were told you'd run off, but they never believed it." Evangeline's eyes flicked to Caldwell, who was studying her with the intensity of a snake, watching a mouse. "They were right not to believe it." "What happened to you, Miss Harper?" Captain Morrison asked. "Where have you been?" This was the moment of truth. Evangeline could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, and she knew that her next words would determine not just her own fate, but possibly the fate of Swift Eagle's entire band. "I was pushed off Devil's Canyon cliff by Sheriff Caldwell because I refused to marry him." The silence that followed was so complete that Evangeline could hear the wind rustling through the grass and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk. Then everyone started talking at once. "That's impossible." Lying savage sympathizer, serious accusation. "Cliffs 100 feet high." Captain Morrison raised his hand for quiet, his military bearing commanding respect even from the civilians. "That's a very serious accusation. Miss Harper, are you certain of what you're saying?" "I'm certain of what happened to me, Captain." Caldwell stepped forward, his face a mask of concerned authority. "Captain, the girl has obviously been through a terrible ordeal. She's been living with hostiles for months. God knows what they did to her, what they forced her to say." "Nobody forced me to say anything, Sheriff. I'm telling the truth." "The truth?" Caldwell's voice rose. "The truth is that you disappeared from your family's homestead without a trace. The truth is that Comanche raiding parties have been hitting settlements all along this territory. The truth is that you've been brainwashed by savages into believing their lies about civilized people. The only savage I've encountered in this territory is you." Evangeline replied evenly. Caldwell's face flushed red with anger, but before he could respond, Captain Morrison intervened again. "Miss Harper, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. Leave nothing out." So Evangeline told her story. She described Caldwell's escalating harassment, the threats against her family, the deputies who arrested her father on false charges, and the barn that mysteriously caught fire. She told them about that final morning when Caldwell and his men came to the homestead, about being taken to Devil's Canyon, and about being pushed from the cliff. "I survived because I caught on a ledge 30 feet down," she continued. "I would have died there if not for a Comanche warrior who found me, gave me water and medicine, and eventually helped me reach his people's winter camp." "A Comanche helped you?" One of the civilians scoffed. "And I suppose they treated you like a guest and taught you to braid your hair?" "Actually, yes. They treated me with more kindness and respect than I ever received from the good citizens of Cedar Ridge." This statement caused another eruption of angry voices, but Captain Morrison silenced them again. "Sheriff Caldwell, what's your response to these accusations?" Caldwell straightened his vest and assumed his most official bearing. "Captain, this is clearly a case of a young woman who's been subjected to months of savage influence. The Comanche are known for their ability to turn captives against their own people. Miss Harper has obviously been told what to say to protect her captors. I'm protecting no one." Evangeline said firmly, "I'm telling the truth because it's the right thing to do." The right thing. Caldwell's control was beginning to slip. The right thing would have been to accept my proposal and save everyone this trouble. The right thing would be to admit that you brought this on yourself with your stubborn pride. Captain Morrison's eyebrows rose at this inadvertent admission. So you did propose to Miss Harper? Caldwell realized his mistake too late. Well, yes, but, and she refused. That's beside the point. The point, Evangeline interrupted, is that Sheriff Caldwell couldn't accept that a woman might choose her own destiny. So he decided to murder me for it. Murder? Caldwell laughed harshly. If I wanted to murder you, girl, you'd be dead. The fact that you're standing here proves that whatever happened at Devil's Canyon, it wasn't murder. Only because I was lucky enough to survive your attempt. Captain Morrison looked thoughtful. Miss Harper, you say this Comanche warrior helped you. Is he still with his people? Yes. And would he be willing to testify to what he saw? Evangeline's heart pounded. This was the crucial moment, the point where Swift Eagle would either remain safely hidden or expose himself to the justice of white men who had already decided that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. I believe he would, she said carefully, but I want your word as an officer that he'll be given safe passage and fair treatment. You're hardly in a position to make demands, Caldwell snarled. But Captain Morrison nodded slowly. If this man can provide testimony about what happened at Devil's Canyon, I give you my word that he'll be treated fairly under military protection. Evangeline looked up at the hills where she knew Swift Eagle was watching. She raised her right hand and made a subtle gesture, the Comanche sign for come forward, that he had taught her months ago. A few minutes later, Swift Eagle rode down into the valley, his horse moving at a steady walk that suggested confidence rather than surrender. He was dressed in his finest clothes, beaded buckskin shirt, eagle feather in his hair, rifle across his saddle, and he carried himself with the dignity of a warrior who feared no man. The reaction from Caldwell's party was immediate and hostile. Men reached for weapons, and several horses shied at their riders' sudden tension. Easy. Captain Morrison commanded, no one draws a weapon without my order. Swift Eagle rode directly to Evangeline's side, his presence immediately making her feel stronger and more confident. You are the Indian who supposedly witnessed this alleged incident? Captain Morrison asked. I am called Swift Eagle. I see man with star push woman from high place. I see her fall, catch on stone ledge. I help her live. His English was careful but clear, and his steady gaze met Captain Morrison's without flinching. And you're willing to swear to this testimony? I speak truth. White man's oath or Comanche word? Truth is same. Caldwell could no longer contain himself. Captain, you're not seriously going to take the word of a savage over that of a duly appointed law officer? I'm going to take testimony from all available witnesses and make my determination based on the facts. The facts are simple. One of the civilians called out, Indians lie. And this one's been coaching the girl on what to say. Swift Eagle turned toward the speaker, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. White man speak of lies. White man who take Comanche land, kill Comanche buffalo, break every treaty made. You know much about lies. The tension in the valley was becoming explosive. Evangeline could see hands moving toward gun butts, and she knew that one wrong word could turn this confrontation into a massacre. Captain Morrison, she said quickly, there's something else you should know, something that might help you understand the truth about Sheriff Caldwell's character. What's that, Miss Harper? 3 nights ago, a Comanche scouting party observed Sheriff Caldwell's camp. They saw him and several of his men discussing what they would do if they found me alive with the Indians. Caldwell went pale. That's ridiculous. They heard Sheriff Caldwell say that it would be easier if I were found dead. Evangeline continued, that way, there would be no inconvenient questions about what really happened at Devil's Canyon. Captain Morrison's expression darkened. Is this true, Sheriff? Of course it's not true. You're going to believe Indian spies, over. I heard him myself. Deputy Morrison spoke up suddenly, stepping away from Caldwell's group. 3 nights ago, round the campfire, Sheriff said it would be cleaner if the girl didn't survive to tell her story. Every eye turned to the deputy, who looked sick with fear but determined to speak. Morrison. Caldwell's voice was sharp with warning. You're mistaken about what you heard. No, sir, I'm not, and I'm not willing to be part of covering up attempted murder. This betrayal from one of his own men seemed to break something in Caldwell. His face contorted with rage, and his hand dropped to his gun. "You bastard!" But Swift Eagle was faster. Before Caldwell could clear leather, the Comanche warrior had his rifle pointed directly at the sheriff's chest. "Move slow, Swift Eagle," advised quietly, "or move to spirit world." The standoff lasted only seconds before Captain Morrison drew his own sidearm and pointed it at Caldwell. "Sheriff, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. You'll be transported to Fort Richardson for trial. You can't arrest me based on the testimony of a savage and a hysterical woman. I can and I am. Deputy Morrison, please secure the sheriff's weapons." As the deputy moved to disarm his former boss, Caldwell's face went through a series of expressions: rage, fear, and finally, cold calculation. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on Evangeline. "You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've unleashed. There are more of us than there are of you, and we have long memories." "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" Captain Morrison asked. "It's a fact. The frontier doesn't forgive those who side with savages against their own kind." Swift Eagle lowered his rifle but didn't move away from Evangeline's side. "Maybe," he said thoughtfully, "but frontier also not forgive men who throw women from cliffs." The trial of Sheriff Matthias Caldwell took place at Fort Richardson 6 weeks later, drawing attention from across the territory. It was rare for a white law officer to be charged with crimes based partly on Indian testimony, and the outcome would set important precedents for future cases. Evangeline testified for 2 full days, describing not just the events at Devil's Canyon but the pattern of harassment and intimidation that had led up to them. Swift Eagle's testimony, delivered with quiet dignity through a military interpreter, corroborated her story in every detail that Deputy Morrison's testimony proved crucial, as he described not just what he'd heard around the campfire, but months of witnessing Caldwell's abuse of power. Other witnesses came forward as well, townspeople from Cedar Ridge, who had been too afraid to speak up before, but found courage in numbers. The defense attorney tried to discredit both Evangeline and Swift Eagle, arguing that she had been brainwashed by her captors and that no Indian testimony should be trusted in a court of law. But the physical evidence supported their story. The ledge where Evangeline had been found still showed signs of her presence, and a military survey confirmed that it was impossible to reach that position except by falling from above. In the end, Matthias Caldwell was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. It was a landmark verdict that sent ripples across the frontier. Justice could be found, even for those who had previously been considered powerless. But the trial's end only began a new chapter in Evangeline's story. Her parents had traveled to Fort Richardson for the proceedings, and their reunion was both joyful and painful. They were overjoyed to have their daughter alive, but they struggled to understand the changes in her. The girl who had left Cedar Ridge was gone, replaced by a woman who spoke of Indians as friends and seemed more comfortable sleeping under stars than under a roof. "You could come back with us," her mother said during one of their talks. "We could start over somewhere new, maybe go back to Missouri." "I can't go back, Mama. I'm not the same person who left, but you're still our daughter." "Yes, and I always will be, but I have to find my own path now." Josiah Harper understood better than his wife what his daughter was telling them. "You're going back to them, aren't you? To the Comanche, not to stay permanently, but I have obligations. They're friendships that matter to me, and I have skills now that could help bridge the gap between our peoples." "It's dangerous," Constance said, tears in her eyes. "What if there's more trouble? What if other soldiers don't understand the way Captain Morrison did? Then I'll face that when it comes. But I can't live my life hiding from what might happen." Swift Eagle had waited respectfully during these family conversations, understanding that Evangeline needed time to work through her relationships with her parents. But on the last night before the Comanche band was scheduled to return to their winter grounds, she found him sitting by a small fire outside the fort. "My parents want me to go back to white society," she told him, "and I want to make my own choices for the first time in my life." Swift Eagle poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing up into the night sky. what choices you make. Evangeline sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth from his shoulder. I want to learn more about both worlds, white and Comanche. I want to understand how people can live together instead of always fighting. This could dream, but dreams and waking sometimes different things. I know, but someone has to try, don't they? He looked at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that she'd been hoping to see for weeks. You want to try with Comanche man, who maybe love white woman. The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Evangeline thought about all the conventions she would be breaking, all the people who would condemn her choice. Then she thought about the months of kindness, respect, and growing affection that had brought them to this moment. I want to try with a good man who sees me as I really am, she said simply. Swift Eagle reached into his medicine pouch and pulled out a second eagle pendant, this one carved from white bone instead of the brown one she wore. 2 eagles, he said, holding them both up to catch the firelight. Different colors, but same sky, same wind under wings. Evangeline took the white pendant, feeling its smooth surface and the love that had gone into its creation. When did you make this night you decide to face sheriff with truth? I know then you have eagle spirit, ready to fly anywhere. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling more at peace than she had since falling from that cliff months ago. Where do we fly first? First, we go home to my people. You still have much to learn about being Comanche woman. And after that, we see what sky looks like from high place. Maybe we fly to white settlements. Show them that Comanche and whites can live in same sky. Maybe we fly to other tribes, share what we learn about making peace instead of war. That sounds like a big sky to cover. Swift Eagle smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. Good thing eagles can fly long distances. The next morning, Evangeline said goodbye to her parents with promises to write when possible and visit when she could. It was a painful parting, but it was also honest. She was choosing her own path, even though it led away from everything familiar. As the Comanche band rode out from Fort Richardson, heading back toward the vast plains that had become her true home, Evangeline felt the eagle pendant bouncing against her chest and thought about how much her life had changed in less than a year. She had been thrown from a cliff for refusing to surrender her freedom to a man who saw her as property. Now she rode beside a man who had helped her discover that freedom was something you had to claim for yourself again and again. With every choice you made, the frontier stretched endlessly ahead of them, full of dangers and possibilities in equal measure. But for the first time in her life, Evangeline Harper was exactly where she belonged, flying free under an endless sky, with someone who understood that love meant helping each other soar higher rather than trying to clip each other's wings. Behind them, the smoke from Fort Richardson's chimneys disappeared into the distance. Ahead lay the winter camp, where Singing Crow would welcome her back with tears of joy, and Running Bear would nod his approval of the choice she'd made. And beyond that lay spring, when the grass would grow green again, and the eagles would ride the thermals high above the prairie, free and wild and answerable to no one but the wind. Epilogue. 10 years later, in the spring of 1857, a small trading post was established at the confluence of 2 streams, in what would later become western Texas. It was run by a remarkable couple of white women who spoke fluent Comanche and could track game across any terrain, and a Comanche man who understood white customs and could negotiate fair trades between the 2 cultures. The post became known as Eagle's Rest, and it served as a neutral ground where whites and Indians could meet, trade, and sometimes even find common ground. Children of both peoples played together in the dusty yard, learning each other's languages and games. Evangeline Swift Eagle, as she now called herself, kept detailed journals of these encounters, documenting the small victories and occasional setbacks in the ongoing effort to build bridges between 2 very different worlds. Her writings would later be studied by historians trying to understand how peace was possible, even in the most turbulent times. Swift Eagle became known among both whites and Indians as a man of absolute integrity, someone whose word could be trusted regardless of which language he spoke it in. His reputation for fairness grew, and more than once he was called upon to mediate disputes. that might otherwise have led to bloodshed. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son who grew up fully bilingual and completely comfortable in both cultures. The children would later become important figures in their own right, helping to guide their peoples through the difficult transitions of the late 19th century. But all of that was still in the future on that spring morning in 1857 when Evangeline stood on the porch of their trading post, watching her husband work with a group of young warriors who had come to learn about peaceful interaction with white settlers. She touched the eagle pendant she still wore, now joined by a wedding band that swift eagle had carved from white buffalo bone. In her other hand, she held a letter from her parents, who had finally moved to a town near the trading post, so they could be part of their grandchildren's lives. Mama, tell the story, called her eldest daughter from where she sat with a group of mixed heritage children in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Which story? Evangeline asked, though she already knew the answer. The flying story. So Evangeline told them again about the girl who was thrown from a cliff for refusing to surrender her freedom, and how she learned to fly by finding people who believed in her strength rather than her weakness. She told them about the importance of speaking truth even when it was dangerous, and about how love meant helping each other become the best versions of themselves. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they'd heard the story dozens of times before. It was their story too. In a way, the story of how 2 different worlds could create something new and beautiful when they came together with respect and understanding rather than fear and hatred. As the sun set over the prairie that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Evangeline and Swift Eagle sat together on their porch, watching their children play and their various peoples learn to live in harmony. "You think we done good?" Swift Eagle asked, his English still carrying the careful cadence of someone speaking a second language. "I think we've made a start," Evangeline replied. "That's all anyone can do, make a start, and hope others will continue the work." Somewhere in the distance, a real eagle cried as it soared high above the plains, riding the thermals toward whatever adventure awaited beyond the horizon. Evangeline smiled, remembering the frightened girl who had once thought she was trapped on a ledge, with no way up or down. That girl had learned to fly, and in learning to fly, she had discovered that the sky was big enough for everyone who had the courage to spread their wings. Greater than. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.